Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Needy No More, the podcast dedicated to healing the anxious attachment style. I'm your host, anxious attachment style coach and author, Chris Ratcliffe. I've helped thousands of people across 6 continents to end the cycle of anxious attachment through my books, workshops, digital downloads, and coaching program. I'm excited to carry on that mission here in the podcast, sharing tools and techniques, principles and practices for you to explore on your journey to growing more secure. Welcome back, everyone. It's been a bit since we've been live here on the show, and I cannot tell you how excited I am to share today's episode with you. We have a very special guest, and her name is Jessica Baum. Jessica Baum is a licensed therapist and the author of Anxiously Attached. As founder of the Relationship Institute of Palm Beach and the Conscious Relationship Group, she supports individuals and couples to form healthy, long-term relationships with online coaching and transformational courses worldwide. Born and raised in Manhattan, she now lives in West Palm Beach, Florida. Her new book, Safe, an attachment-informed guide to building more secure relationships, is out October 28th, 2025. Jessica, welcome on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Yay, me too. I have to say, I know I mentioned this to you before we hopped on today and hit record. I have read the book. I encourage everyone listening to this and watching this episode to buy it. It is so squarely in the wheelhouse of what I talk about on the show, what I espouse in every aspect of my work, all of my downloads, my books, my coaching program. So I have really been looking forward to diving in deep today.
And that just means so much to me when someone like you takes the time to read the material and really values it and aligns with it. So I appreciate that.
You are more than welcome. Like I mentioned to you previously, I've been on the other side here as the author promoting something. It's always so awkward when they haven't read the book and you can tell, and they're kind of flipping through the pages and trying to come up with things on the spot, So I want to make sure that you feel safe and seen and understood. And I loved the book, and I can't wait for people to read it and really digest it. Why don't we start with just a very basic question here for folks? All of the folks watching and listening are anxiously attached or disorganized, leaning anxious. So let's just start by defining the word safe or safety. How would you define that for folks watching and listening?
Everybody wants to feel safe, right? Like that's the new thing. But in the book, I use a lot of Stephen Porges's work around the nervous system. And I'm going to really simplify this right now, but we have 3 branches. We have a dorsal, which is a shutdown, which sometimes you see avoidant people kind of go into dorsal, or you just see people shut down or close up or distance. And we have a sympathetic, which is more of an activated state. And then we have something called ventral. And a ventral state is where we're in our social engagement system and we're actually signaling safety to each other. Chris, you and I are, through eye contact, through tone, we're signaling, hey, it's safe to have conversation. Hey, it's safe to come closer. And so our nervous system is fluctuating through these states all day long. We're not ever statically in these states. But in our deep romantic relationships, they can activate certain things within us that can shift us into dorsal or into sympathetic and out of a state of safety. So a lot of people will deeply learn like what that is and also how someone else's state of safety, a state of being in ventral more. Again, it's not perfect, but they hold a ventral state, can hold our state of dysregulation and how healing happens when those two things come together. So it's really a sense of safety that starts to birth our own healing process. So we need that sense of safety in order to heal attachment wounds.
Amen to that. I always say to folks, if you were healed in unsafe relationships, then you heal through safe relationships. And being seen and having someone look you in the eye and just hold the space for you to listen truly without interrupting, without preparing what they're going to say, really seeing you and seeing the reactions in your body and how you are. I also remind myself all the time, like I say to myself, your presence is powerful. As a coach, I have to remind myself all the time, I'm not always going to be able to help someone get to where they want to go. They have to help themselves. And my presence is powerful enough. If I can hold the space for them, if I can greet them with a state of regulation and help them to co-regulate by identifying their emotions and figuring out where they are in their body and how to be with that, that is powerful enough. I don't have to take it on or take it away, which for many years, as a anxiously attached person myself and former codependent, I would do, right? And I think a lot of people can relate to that too.
100%. I mean, safety is the treatment. And as people who provide that for others, it's not that we have to have a perfect sense of safety, but when we can show up in that state and hold that, beautiful things happen. And I explain the science of that. Like, that's just not woo woo. Like, there's a science that, when two nervous systems come together and that state is being able to hold space. That's essentially what it is. And I dive deep into that so that people can really understand that concept.
Yes, you certainly do. And I love the reference to Porges's polyvagal theory there. That's obviously critical for people to understand the different branches of their nervous system and why they're feeling the reactions that they are. Many folks, I think, have a basic understanding. They might say, I'm feeling triggered, or I didn't like that, or I'm not comfortable with that. But this really gives a lot more complexity for folks to understand where they are in that kind of scale, if you will. For those who are listening, I'm kind of referencing up and down motions here, almost like a scale. So we can understand where we are on that scale at any given time and to recognize that it isn't a static or a fixed state. One of the things that you talk about in the book is your own personal journey with healing your patterns and your own traumas and your own anxious attachment, and how your own fears have come up in a variety of different relationships. And I thought it was so powerful to hear you talk about the relationship with your mom and your grandma, and also a previous relationship where a lot of childhood stuff ended up coming out, a lot of fears of abandonment. And I know that folks watching and listening can relate to that, because that's something all anxious attachers struggle with, is that fear of abandonment and previous experiences creeping back up into their minds when they might be in a romantic partnership. What do you have to say to those watching and listening who are more anxiously attached and who have experienced similar kinds of traumas that have led to them feeling unsafe or fearing abandonment in their adult relationships?
Yeah, I mean, this might be hard to hear if you're listening, but there's a line in the book that says if you don't heal your abandonment wound, you will recreate it. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And what I would say is that if you are conscious, so I think avoidant people are unconscious more of it, but if you're anxious, you're more conscious of your abandonment wound. The way to heal it would be to go back to the original wound and to start to embody or get in touch with the embodied experience of feeling abandoned in the first place by probably a primary caregiver and having that deeply held. Because if not, we're consciously trying to keep people close to avoid that feeling within. And I know, I'm so guilty of it, right? And I wrote the book Anxiously Attached, but it wasn't until I was really held deeply in my wound that the wound is now accompanied with the feeling of being held. So it's not that I'm alone anymore. It's that when I think of the times that I was alone, I have had so much support around re-experiencing them and being held in them, that those memories and implicit memories are no longer carrying the aloneness feeling that I originally had.
I think that's such a great point here, is that the pain doesn't necessarily go away. I think in a lot of ways we learn to hold it differently, and also to rely on others to help us hold it so that we don't feel alone in the pain. This is something I remind my clients of who are parents all the time. You don't need to take away the pain of your child. You cannot do that. They just need to know that they're not alone in it. And similarly, when that inner child within you who wasn't heard or seen, or who many of us may have kind of pushed down and repressed and suppressed in various ways. That kind of expression and co-regulation with others helps us to see, wow, I can talk about this. I don't have to go through this on my own. And to me, in a lot of ways, that's what healing your inner child and safety are all about. And you do talk about the inner child healing a lot in the book as well.
Yeah, and I think it's good for your audience specifically if you're listening. Healing anxious attachment cannot be done alone. So if you are wounded in relationship, like you said, Chris, you need to be healed in relationship. But also, and I talk about this in the book, the younger the wounding, the more adult anchoring you need. So for people who struggle with early abandonment wounds, and you know that you're struggling, if you're listening, if you're having extreme sensations in your body, if your gut and your heart are really kind of activated, you know that there's a much younger part of you in there that needs healing. And I don't want people wasting their time thinking that they can do this inner child work all on their own. The truth is, part of moving the attachment trauma is a re-experiencing the original wound in the presence of someone who can give you what you didn't get at the time of the wound. So if you were abandoned, you need to be met. So you need to regress and you need to meet these parts with another nervous system and recognize the original wound and also allow someone to come in and support you. That is the only way to move the wound. So all these self-help books that are like, heal yourself and you can do this on your own. When you really start to understand interpersonal neurobiology and how we're wired and how trauma and attachment wounds are stored, I would be setting you up for failure if I said, yes, you can do this all on your own. The truth is, we really, really need people in order to start to heal these deeper wounds.
Connection is a biological imperative. I think you may even mention that almost
Like
verbatim
10
in the book.
times.
Yeah. It's so important for people to hear that, though, because there's this insistence in our culture, which is hyper individualized as it is, and our state of politics shows us this, I think, very clearly in the United States. But that said, hyper individualization and the obsession with needing to be independent and carry all of this on your own can actually be more harmful than helpful. I always remind people that it's about self and it's about other. And in my own book, Needy No More, same name as the podcast and my coaching program, I talk about how many insecure attachers, especially anxious attachers, actually prevent the relationships that they might be in from growing more secure and being safer because they themselves are not allowing themselves to be seen. They're not opening up and sharing what it is that they're feeling. They shut down. Of course, we do this because we're afraid of being too much, of being abandoned. We have shame wounds and feelings of inadequacy, which are very common. But safety also requires us to be able to open up into other people and see how they receive that. If we don't do that, then we rob ourselves a lot of times of the safety that we could be experiencing or the data we could be gathering on the degree of safety that might be present in a given connection, because it's never going to be 100%. So I think that's also important to name here as well. We need other people, and we also need to be brave and dig deep and have courage to open up into connection. Because if we don't, then we also prevent ourselves from experiencing that very safety.
I went through a period in my own work where being vulnerable was really hard. And I'm a therapist who's been practicing for a really long time. And if you're listening, like there's I want to say ickiness, but it's really shame that can come up when we start to depend on people. And there's this vulnerability that also came up for me that was like, oh my God, like I am that vulnerable and fragile. Like I really need to depend on my anchors. And that's really, really hard. And moving into deep vulnerability And I think that's the portal. Like if you're listening like that, actually that feeling of like, this is really hard and I have to actually depend on people and I feel like a burden. It's like, no, this is how we build inner security. And this feeling that it's like part of the process until we internalize the right people, right? So if you lean on safe people and they show up consistently for you, your nervous system starts to register. You might need them more until you internalize them. The opposite of that is if you turn to unavailable people and they don't show up for you, you're just kind of re-injuring yourself. So one of the things I had to do was, I loved my partner very much, but there were lots of parts of him that were unavailable. So I had to start to bring these parts of me that were showing up to people who had the capacity and the safety in their nervous system to hold my younger parts so I can integrate and heal them. So if you're listening, it's also about knowing who has the capacity and who doesn't, and not falling into like a trauma bonded kind of situation where you're going to lean on people who literally are repeating your trauma and don't have the capacity to hold that kind of space for you.
The capacity and sometimes the willingness. And that is a very powerful point to make here. I think many of us do recreate emotionally distant dynamics. Oftentimes, unconsciously, of course, we don't do it on purpose. No one would ever, I think, choose to consciously recreate their trauma. We do it to try to resolve it without realizing that the nervous system always seeks out what is familiar. And that's because it knows how to be with it, even if it's painful or uncomfortable. That unfamiliarity, even if it might reach a more peaceful state, a calmer state, feels almost at times more triggering to the nervous system because of the unfamiliarity. So I love what you're saying, and I think it's really, really powerful for people to hear. You're going to repeat what you don't repair, and that is also okay. We all do this. Literally almost every single insecure attacher I've ever met, anxious, avoidant, otherwise, does this until we grow more conscious of our patterns and then interrupt them. And a lot of that does boil down to the people that we choose to provide access to us. And there's a concept in my own work where it's called emotional diversification, where you have to diversify your sources of connection, because if you're going kind of all in on a romantic partnership, that's very emotionally risky. And for many of us who are repeating patterns of disconnection and trauma from the past, that also means that we are showing our nervous system that all of its fears are confirmed. So you have to give yourself data that you gather from other folks who can hold the space, who can listen to you and see you and hear you and be there with you. Even if they, again, can't take it away, they can just tell you, look, I'm here for you. I want you to know I care. How about we go to lunch tomorrow? Like, what can I do for you? We need to hear that, because many of us, having experienced abandonment, this is our response to that in adulthood. So the more that we can experience that kind of safety in adulthood, the more it does write over that pain of the past, like you so beautifully mentioned about anchoring. And I do want to talk about that. I want to define that for folks. This is a big part of the book. And I love the way that it's described just because of the metaphor of the anchor. But talk to us about what an anchor is and why they're important.
Yeah, I mean, I use the word anchor, and it doesn't have to be a therapist or a coach. And some therapists and coaches don't know how to hold space. But this book very much also is a companion for you to bring to a therapist or coach or friend who fits in the category of they're committed to showing up. They will not have an agenda. They will not fix you, and they can hold deep space for you. And I spell out, we talked about the state of safety or the ventral nervous system, but I also spell out like how to do this with a friend, because not everybody can afford coaching or therapy, and not every therapist and coach knows how to do this. So hopefully it's a way for everyone to kind of have these resources. And I think a big thing that I get in my practice and in the world is I have no anchors. And so it's a little intimidating to know, like, part of this work is finding your anchors. And what I'll say is it only takes one relationship to have the experience of holding this space, and what I really spell out in the book, to change the trajectory of all your relationships, Because what you're doing is you're picking one person who has these capacities, and maybe you're having a co-agreement with them and you're co-anchoring each other, and you're now letting your nervous system have a different experience. Or you're starting to recognize that this person shows up for me, holds space for me, co-regulates with me, and this is what I need in a partner too, right? And often with anxiously attached people, our scared parts get like run at an avoidant person, and they're like, I can't handle these scared parts because they're scaring me, right? So a lot of what needs to happen are these scared parts need to find an anchor, and they still need to be experienced. And I like what you said like a few minutes ago, like the difference between your avoidant partner sometimes showing up for you and an anchor showing up for you is sometimes what you really want is the pain to go away. But when you're really healing, it's not about taking her or his pain away. It's about finding people who can show up and help you hold the pain. We need to start holding the experience rather than trying to get rid of the experience, because the more we can hold it and share like what we call a window of tolerance, the more that we can build our own capacity to be with these younger parts within ourselves, and the less they take over in that degree. It was an important distinction for me too. My partner could make the pain go away, but I really needed to learn how to be with the pain. And so I needed people who were going to sit in it with me. And that was so important. And it was important to find those people. And I've just been so fortunate to have such wonderful people show up in my life. And I'm hoping that if you're listening, go through your Rolodex, there's got to be one person in there that you're not even thinking of right now or in the next week or two. Think of like, who shows up in my life? Who can I be vulnerable with? Who doesn't judge me, try to fix me, or dismiss me?
Very well said. In my first book, It's Good to See Me Again, I wrote a chapter called The Board of Directors, where I talk about how in my own life, I have a board of people. And sometimes there's a shuffling of the board of directors. They're kind of the 5 closest people in my life at any given time. Not to kind of harken back to a MySpace top 8 or something like that. But, we all have our kind of folks that hopefully we can go to. And if you feel that you don't, you can always start with a professional. And you should kind of date around, test out a few different professionals and see how you feel with them. The most important thing is that you should feel they really get you, and that they're sometimes going to challenge you to sit with that pain. Because a good therapist, a good coach, they're not just going to say, and how does that feel? They're going to say, well, hold on, wait a second. Actually, we need to go back to that. I think you need to sit with that for a moment. Let's be with that. And as you're talking about anchors, of course, my own anchors, come to mind. There's so many experiences that I've had over the years that have helped me to see, you know what? I can be with this pain, and I can call this person. I can text them and say, code red, please, I need you to come over. Can we order Thai food and watch a movie and just chat, please? I think we all need that. Getting down into the nitty-gritty of what it looks like, it's not this kind of grandiose idea that so many people build in their head. It's just literally saying to someone, I'm struggling with this. This is how I'm feeling. And then being like, yeah, babe, I get it. That's really tough. Like, is there anything I can do? Do you need me to do anything? Do you want me to just listen? If you have someone that's really emotionally intelligent, they'll know too that it's not always about doing either.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like, you want to really stay away from doing, and you want to be more, the magic is the being with. So your anchors, and I spell it out, it's more about I am with you in this experience. You're not alone. And you might even feel alone, but I'm right here next to you with the intensity of. So that's often what we didn't get as children because of our, and the book talks really deeply about attachment styles and what your parents might have been going through in order for you to adapt in the way that you did, and how those adaptations show up in your adult life. And I explain the wheel of attachment, which is so new, but it really shows you like the full picture of what you didn't get. And a lot of people didn't get emotional holding, and that is the number one thing that builds secure attachment. It's not love, it's emotional presence that builds inner security. So if you're listening, that's exactly what you need as an adult, to start to fill in what you didn't get as a child. So once you start to receive what you didn't get, that's when the work starts to show up.
Amen to that. And it's not just a romantic partner that can do it, y'all. It's a friend, it's a family member, it's a professional. Sometimes it could even maybe be a colleague, someone that you get coffee or lunch with, who that consistency just adds up over time, where you can share to the degree that it might be professionally acceptable, of course, and just have them there with you so that, again, you know you're not alone in it. So, so powerful for people to hear that. You got to build your support system. And if you have to start with one person and that person is a mental health professional, then please do so. Do so.
Absolutely. And make sure that professional doesn't try to fix you, doesn't try to diagnose you, doesn't try to put an agenda on you. Make sure they're going into the body. And if they're really good and you like them, but they're not going there, bring the book. The book is literally a roadmap to do with a professional as well, and make sure they're, going into, in your implicit world, into the attachment wounds and into the body, because we can't heal attachment wounds logically. We have to be with what's going on in our soma.
Amen. I definitely want to talk about somatics, and I just want to reference something you said earlier before we do. You were talking about how a lot of times we might go to someone, usually if you're anxiously attached, then probably a romantic partner or prospect, to try to get them to take away the pain. I think it's really important to recognize this is how we create dependency, and more importantly, codependency. That person becomes a drug. They become the pathway through which we're able to experience relief, instead of learning how to be with that and share it with a variety of people.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, I've been there. We all do it unconsciously. And if you're in a relationship that is a little bit like that, that relationship can be the portal in. And I talk about using your relationship, if it's activating you a lot, as the portal into either your own healing or collective healing. Because I do believe I helped many anxious avoidant attachments heal. And I talk about that in the book. And I also think that if you're in a relationship that is waking up a lot in you, that is your portal. Like, you don't need to leave the relationship per se. You need to start to be with the deeper levels of what that relationship is actually waking up and getting conscious around that.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I think a lot of folks also beat themselves up for staying in a relationship while they work on some of this, even if it might not be fulfilling. But relationships are a practice ground. It's experiences that help us to learn and apply a lot of these principles. And of course, hindsight is always 2020, as they say.
You know
I
what?
do
I
want to,
have no regrets, right? Like, it's not so easy to leave, and we all get there in our own time.
of course, yeah, we all find acceptance in our own way and on our own timeline, certainly. And I help people to understand that too. Like, it's easy for you to say now that you would have left sooner, but maybe it's actually important that you repeated what you needed to in the relationship to arrive at a place where you were finally able to accept that you were done. Many of us need to do that. I want to talk somatics because this is an area that I'm super passionate about. In the book, you talk a lot about how to identify sensations in your body, the concept of interoception. Talk to me and the folks watching and listening about why this is important and how to practice it.
Yeah, I think it's 5 meditations in the book, but 6 on my website. So if you buy the book, they're in there, and I record them separately for you, so you can work on building interoception. How we store attachment wounds when we're younger is in our fascia, in our gut, in our nervous system, in our heart space. I store a lot. I stored a lot in my heart space. We have to store these things in our body when we can't process them. That's literally, it's not that traumatic things happen to us, it's that we are not able to process them, so they get stored in the body. For anyone who's listening, if you're working on your attachment wounds and your therapist or your coach or anybody is not going into the body, not really going to get to the root of it. So we have something called implicit memory. The sensations that live in our body are memory. So when we're born, we don't have explicit memory. We can't think of things like the way you would think of a movie. We don't have that part of our brain fully developed yet. So we're really born with the ability to store sensations. So when your gut hurts or you feel queasy or your chest is tight, I want you to know that that is memory. That is your little me. There is science there. I go into deep detail. You can't read this book and not walk away without understanding memory on a deep level. When we're younger and our parents don't have the capacity because they didn't develop interoception themselves, so they're not sitting down with us, they're not saying, hey, Chris, what's going on inside you? How you feeling? Where do you feel that? Oh, that makes sense. And they're not mirroring you and they're not reflecting you and they're not giving you a sense of what is inside of you going on, what matters. How do you start to be with your body? We end up like disconnecting from our body in many ways. I know that I write about feeling very disconnected, like a walking head. And so many of us live in our left hemisphere and pretty disconnected from our body. But our body is where we store, it's where we store the memory. And so a lot of the book talks about shifting out of our left hemisphere into our right hemisphere, meeting another person in the state of safety in our right hemisphere. This is all very scientific, but allowing the streams in our body to come alive and to start to tune into what our body is telling us and start to understand memory on a deep level and have that held. If we didn't build interoception, we can build it as an adult. It is actually neurowiring that they show that we can build as an adult and we can learn how to have interoception. We just need a little support as an adult to start to do that. So I gently do that in the book. There are meditations throughout the book. So if you buy the physical book, you will get them. I recorded them in the audio and I recorded them separately because I want people to be able to go there and practice that so much, because if they don't have the neurowiring, it really takes a lot of practice to start to tune into the sensations in our body and build the capacity for interoception as an adult.
Super, super important there. There is the connection between a lack of attunement and co-regulation growing up with not really developing this skill. Many of us are dissociated and completely detached from the experiences we're having in our body. You know, if you're so disconnected from your system that you don't recognize you're not even pausing to breathe, yeah, you need to learn to slow down and come back into your container. And interoception is how we do that and how we recognize where it's occurring, how it feels, and in so doing, allow the energy to surface and be released. I absolutely am in alignment with everything that you are saying. This is what I espouse in my work as well. I've talked about it already on the podcast, so I know this is going to resonate with so many people. I think it's important that they have that phrasing, though, interoception, so they can do further research on this as well. But remember, folks, it's not always about a logical, rational understanding. This is about embodiment. So slowing down, closing your eyes, recognizing where the constriction, the tightness, the tension might be, maybe not even starting to put a label on it yet, but where is it in you? For me, a lot of times it was also in my heart center, also in
Anxiously
my throat.
Anxiously attached people tend to store more in the heart center, believe it or not. And our avoidant protectors or avoidants have more typically in the stomach.
Makes sense. Makes total sense. When I wasn't speaking up, I would also feel that constriction or tightness in my throat as well.
Yeah. And for anyone who's listening, I know that understanding this information is so important. And I understood it pretty well with anxiously attached and dived way deeper with safe and understand it extremely well. And yet understanding it logically does not bypass the work. Even as a professional, I had to go and do the work. And I thought, well, if I learn enough about it, maybe I can avoid it. I might be the hallmark for that.
Yeah, I'm nodding, I'm smiling, I'm laughing. Yeah, I think we've all been there, certainly. There's such a discomfort with being with those sensations when you don't really learn how to do it, when you don't have a parent who, by the way, you beautifully modeled this. Tell me what's going on, sweetheart. What are you experiencing? Where is it happening? How can I be here for you? I'm not going anywhere. You know, hearing those things, and I think the reason why folks like you and I might even say that out loud for folks is because we're also saying that to ourselves. I've gotten into the practice of pausing. And I know this sounds kooky and wacky and woo woo, probably, but I'm going to keep doing it anyway because it works for me. I will walk around my house and talk to myself when I'm experiencing a deep emotional response to something. I might be in the midst of having like a big emotional reaction, like I might be crying, like sobbing, shaking, and I will stop and almost like reparent myself in that moment by saying, "It's okay, sweetheart, let it out. Let it out. This is what this is for. Good. Keep going. Release. Breathe. You've got this." It's almost like coaching myself through the experience, and it's like a coexistence of like this logical presence and then the emotional experience simultaneously. I don't know, but for me it works, and that's literally what some of this looks like, folks. Crying it
Absolutely.
out, sitting in the discomfort, and learning to let it pass, because it will always pass. And things that are deeply rooted, and you mentioned this earlier, you mentioned it in the book, you might need to practice this multiple times to be with the pain of the same event. I mentioned to
Well,
you, Jessica, before hopping on, this year is the 20th anniversary of my mom's passing. My sister has passed, my dad has passed. I've talked about all of these things openly in my books, all of my work, the podcast. It doesn't mean that the pain goes away. It's different. Grief is unique for each experience that you have and each relationship that you have it with. But I can tell you, I don't experience things as intensely as I used to. And that's because I've allowed a lot of the energy that was stored up, that I pushed down. I didn't even go to my mom's funeral, and I wrote about that in my first book. But allowing that energy to come up and out is so important, and it needs to happen many times, usually.
yeah, and I really want to drive home the point, especially if your audience is anxiously attached. Actually, this brought me relief. Like, you don't do this work alone. You are not supposed to move through those hard spaces all by yourself. You are meant to have someone else be present with you. And, in some ways, it's like, oh, I got to find someone else. But in another way, as someone who identifies as anxiously attached, clearly wrote the book on it, but it gave me relief to know that, like, I can't move into these really hard territories sometimes because I actually need the support of another nervous system to go there. So both is true. Yes, lean into your feelings, talk to yourself, go there. And if you're really stuck, you might need someone else to hold the space. And if it's really young, again, you definitely need someone else to hold space with you.
100%. Yes. And there were a lot of conversations that I've had with my therapist in sessions that have led, and with a lot of other people in my life, that have led to me being able to do this by myself. Not
Right.
always, of course, but to be able to build the muscle of
Exactly.
interoception and self-regulation. And that has occurred because of all of the other experiences of co-regulation with safe people that I have had. It's not mutually exclusive, y'all. It is tied together. The more you experience it with others, the more you learn you can do it with yourself. And also, you don't have to. And that definitely does offer relief. And I'm glad that you named that as well.
Yeah, that's such an important part, Chris. It's like all those Instagram people that are like, self-regulation is where it's at, and you got to learn how to regulate your nervous system. Like, that is almost harmful because from interpersonal neurobiology, if you can't regulate your nervous system, it's because you didn't get enough co-regulation as an infant and young person. So we don't develop the ability to self-regulate unless we get a lot of really healthy co-regulation, and that gets internalized. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I get really dysregulated and I reach out for people, you didn't get enough holding. But with enough holding, you internalize with that co-regulation, you internalize that person, and then you get the capacity for self-regulation. So one leads to the other, and you should never shame yourself. You should never live under the idea that I need to learn how to self-regulate. Like, that's not how it works. If you struggle with self-regulation, more co-regulation will lead to eventually having more internal ability to self-regulate because you'll internalize that process.
Yes, absolutely. You have to experience it through other people to learn how to do it with yourself. And also, I have to say, even just like being a coach and being able to hold the space for other people has been healing for me in a lot of ways too. Like it works both ways. Having other people hold it with me is really powerful, and me being with others and being of service is really powerful too. So it's not just one directional. Remember, we're all interconnected. And that speaks to something that I wanted to talk about with you too, which is compassion. And I have to say, the way that you write is it feels so effortless. I know it's not, okay? As a fellow author, I know it's not effortless. There's a lot that goes into making something look and sound effortless and colloquial and easy to understand and brimming with compassion. And that's really what I took away from Safe. And so I wanted to ask you, you bring this up in the context of, for yourself and also for other people who couldn't love us the way that we needed. We talked about some of that deprivation today. What does compassion look like in practice when you have experienced old pain coming up? I know we've talked about interoception. We've talked about inner child and work and reparenting and things like that. How are you able to bring that compassion to yourself?
Yeah, I think, from doing my own work and being with these, parts within myself and experiencing everything, I think that I think that I'm humbled by how fragile, how impressionable we are, how experiences shape us. I think I've had the embodied experience of that from I even share about a memory of being an infant in the crib that came to me as I was doing my work. I regressed so much. And so I think just from understanding how I've been shaped on such a deep level that I'm able to just have so much compassion for all my choices and all my behaviors now. And I actually have so much compassion for everyone else, even people who have behaviors that might appear hurtful or harmful. And it's not that I allow those behaviors in my life, but I think when you start to do this work, you start to understand, wow, like everyone is adapting and trying to survive in the way that they know how to survive. And a lot of people are doing the best they can. And you don't have to let people into your world, but you start to understand how wounding people wound others. And I start to see like my parts. I used to have a lot of shame around my big feelings because my mom would always say I'm like so sensitive and all this stuff. And as I do this work, it's like my therapist and my anchors were like, wow, like these big feelings in you like are really speaking to things that have really happened to you. And let's like really make space for them because they're so important. And I remember a period of my life where I was like, I'm just going to make so much space for what's going on inside of me to have, have the space to express itself, really pay attention to her. And I don't have big sensational experiences as much anymore. She whispers to me a little bit more now. I think if I was in an unhealthy relationship or if I was in a certain situation, maybe she would get wakened up a little bit more. But now, like, I even just hear her whisper and I'm like, okay, I'm going to put some time aside to be with her. And I think a lot of people would say that I have too much compassion maybe for other people, or that's not the right word, but like there's a fine line between boundaries and letting, people's behaviors. But like when you start to really understand people's behaviors. Like I write in chapter 9, like now when I see someone give me the middle finger on the road, I'm kind of like, oh, that guy probably has like 3 years of crying to do and it's being manifesting into his road rage and he's just an angry, aggressive person who's never had a chance to release anything in his body. Like so my brain works differently now that I've been through this experience. And I think you start to look at everyone differently. Like you start to see that people are adapting and people are trying to do the best with what they've been given, and not everybody's been given what they needed. And so we've just kind of become these adaptive versions of ourselves until we're lucky enough and we have the privilege to heal. And I really think that healing in my own world has been a privilege. I think I'm one of a privileged person to be able to have slowed down enough and have had the resources and the right people to heal these things. And not everybody has the capacity, and not everybody has, the financial resources or the people. Try to have a lot of compassion. And my mentor, Bonnie Badenoch, who really played a heavy hand in helping me write this book, she wrote The Heart of Trauma and has studied interpersonal neurobiology for 20 more years than me. People say that when they interact with her, they've never experienced compassion like through a person. And even in my first interaction with her, I just felt her compassion come through to me. And I feel like she's like imprinted in me in some way. And a lot of the compassion in the book is really her tone also coming through as well.
I mean, that just speaks so eloquently to the power of an anchor in your life to imprint on you.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because the more that I work on my healing, which I still do, by the way, guys, it doesn't stop. I'm still meet with my therapist. I work with coaches off and on. I read books, not as many self-help books as I used to, but having written them and doing coaching, sometimes I need a break, everyone. It can't all be healing all the time. The more I do the work, the more I can recognize the unhealed aspects of others when they're coming up. And I do have compassion for that. And it's interesting because that also coexists with almost like and you can stay over there. You don't need to come any closer than that. Not about avoiding it, but recognizing that person's not safe for me, and they might not even realize the ways that they're showing up. They're very unconscious to this. You can have compassion for that. And I think that also is important for people to hear and understand. If you see someone else struggling, and I know many folks that are listening to this and watching are guilty of this, you don't need to save that person. You don't need to step in and try to fix them or do the work for them or say, hey, I noticed, you seem a little off. Have you thought about reading this book? Let them, not to overuse a certain phrase these days, let them figure it out. Some people never do, and that is okay. You can still have compassion for them. You can see it for what it is, an unhealed part of them. Dysregulation. I mean, there's a lot of different ways of describing this that are all interconnected, but look at it for what it is. They're doing the best that they can, and they're probably not safe for you. That's okay, so long as you recognize that for yourself. Remember, access is everything. Jim Rohn famously said, we're the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with. And I believe that this is true, especially for our nervous system. Get very discerning about the people that you allow to have access to your time and your energy. And recognize no one's going to do this perfectly for you. No one's going to have unending compassion for you. We all have obligations. We're living through very stressful times. We're more distracted than ever. We have a lot of pulls on our attention. But if more often than not, they can do this for you, they might deserve a seat at your table.
100%. Yeah, start locating those people. It's so, so important. And yeah, when you do the work, and I'm sure many people are listening are in the midst of the work or your compassion builds for you and other people as you move through the journey.
It really does. Before I go to some rapid fire questions that I prepared here, what do you want people to take away from SAFE that we haven't already discussed today?
Well, one of the freebies that I have is I talk about the wheel of attachment, and I talk about attachment in a new way. So if you're listening and you identify as anxiously attached, there very rarely do you have one attachment style. And so the wheel, like that I dive deep into and as part of a freebie, talks about how we move along the wheel, how we can have more than one experience with one person, and how attachment is really the combination of two people's embedded patterns. So I want people to understand that this book is more of a holistic view of attachment, and it's a lens on attachment that hasn't been written about before. I want people to understand that they're going to get a very deep dive into the nuances and a more holistic view of attachment if they read the book. I think that that's like a major part of the book, and for people to understand, like, don't box yourself in, like, with anxiously attached. Like, you probably have some security in you. You might have some avoidance as well. And if you read this book, you're going to start to have a deeper understanding of your own complexities and where and how these different patterns show up for you and how to heal them.
Very well said. I mean, it's important to approach this work with nuance. And on that note, when you might identify that someone, maybe it might even be you, is more on the avoidant side of things, please recognize not all avoidants are the same. Not all avoidants are created equal. Not all avoidants are worthy of completely discarding and disqualifying and discrediting because of a label that they might associate with. I just did a TikTok video on this recently and got a lot of flack for it from, speak of the devil, folks who haven't properly processed the pain that they have experienced at the hand of perhaps someone on the more avoidant side of things or more emotionally unavailable side of things. Not all people are the same. Please approach this with more nuance, especially when it comes to yourself. You don't have to be this static label. Not all of us fall so neatly into a category. Nuance, nuance, nuance. It's everything. So
No,
I'm really
that's
glad you brought that.
important. Yeah, and if you read Safe, you're going to deeply understand avoidance, and it's not a permission slip for you to engage in ways that are harmful in certain relationships, but you might walk away with one, understanding your own avoidance and avoidant protectors, and two, you might understand what's at the core of them, and you'll start to make sense of that, which might bring more compassion to the table.
Yep, bringing it full circle. I love it. Yes, absolutely. Okay, rapid fire questions here. What's a practice you return to daily when you need to feel safe in your body?
So I talk about this in the book, but I'll resource my safe people and pretend they're in the room with me. If I can't access them, like call them, I'll say, what does it feel like to have my best friend Julia here? Or how can I feel my friend Alan's presence? Or, and I'll start to like resource the feeling of them around me.
You kind of answered the second question here too. Who is someone alive or gone that instantly brings you a sense of safety when you think of them?
I have a best friend, Julia, and she's just so, I remember when she came into my life, I was actually struggling. She's just this ray of sunshine, and I can call her, and, most of the time she's just really cheery. And I have a friend, Alan, and like he is always there for me. Like I know I don't even need to text him or contact him anymore as much as I did in my thicker healing years. But like he's always there. He's my, my steady. So like I think of these people, they live inside me the way a secure baby internalize secure parents. As adults, we internalize our anchors. So they live inside me as a form of security at all times.
Very well said. What is a common piece of relationship advice that you completely disagree with?
I don't really know one offhand that like irks me. I don't know. All relationships are supposed to heal you. That's not necessarily true. All relationships are mirrors. Sometimes our trauma is doing all the picking, and it's so sad because if we heal that trauma, we might not end up in some of these situations. So be mindful that trauma can really lead us into some scary situations, and it's important to heal that.
Very well said. And if you need to repeat something, but you walk away more quickly, that's also progress, people. So recognize that too. This isn't all or nothing. If you only stayed for a month instead of a year or a decade, that's progress. So celebrate that too. Recognize what you can learn and move forward. If you had to describe what healing feels like in one image or metaphor, what would it be?
I mean, I feel like it's this hard vulnerability and awakening experience of parts of yourself that have been there all along. And if you're listening and you're like, oh, I don't want to feel that, they're there all the time anyway. But a real recognizing of them, and for me, a real vulnerability of letting other people come and help me. I'm so good at helping others, but it's just the space of recognizing them, the shame of having them, working through that, holding them. I mean, everything that we talked about and everything that's in the book, like I have walked through, and hasn't been easy, and it's not easy. But I will tell you, if you're listening, it is liberating. And not that I'm healed, right? Like the journey keeps going, but if you work through the implicit, like the core stuff, you create space in your body and life is better. You have deeper relationships, you feel more free. So there is another side to this when you walk through it. I don't want people to think like this it's this horrible thing. It's a hard, courageous thing to move through, and it creates a life of more deeper connection and more inner space and more peace.
I love that. The recognizing, the awakening part really, I saw this like burst of light come forth that was really beautiful. And that's how I experienced it. The idea of freedom that you described, love it. The peace that you named, yes, beautifully put. Final question. What's the most hopeful change you've seen in your own relationships since doing this work?
I have never felt freedom in the way that I've felt freedom. I just spent the summer in the Hamptons, and I have had so many wonderful people come and visit me, and I am so present in my moments and my connections, and I have so many attachments that fill me instead of just like a primary one that's draining or causing me all my work. I feel like the sense of freedom that I have from more inner security lets me expand so much in my world in ways that I never, and I couldn't show up here today in the way that I am, in the energy that I am, if I hadn't gone through this work and I feel so present and expansive and safe. I'm safe within my own being. And I wasn't, I wasn't for years. And I didn't even know that I was just surviving.
Wow. There's so many parallels in our stories, in our careers. The final section of Needy No More, the book, is called Expansion for that very reason. I've experienced that feeling myself too. And it's not this constant state of bliss, but it is a more kind of consistent drumbeat of connection that, I don't know, it makes you feel more fulfilled, more supported, like you're not alone in all of this, that you're not the only one who struggles. I think that's kind of the essence of being human. We all struggle, and recognizing that you can share that with others, you can be there for them in their struggle. Yeah, it does make you feel freer, I think, recognizing that. Definitely.
Absolutely.
Jessica, this has been an absolute honor and pleasure. How can people find you and pre-order or order Safe?
Yeah. So I am giving Chris a link. Actually gives you guys free gifts. So it's a beyond the label like PDF that talks about the wheel of attachment. And there's like a 40-minute video of me talking with my mentor, Bonnie Badenoch, about what it feels like to earn security. So if you fill out the form and put your email in there, you will get those free gifts. Check your spam, but they come automatically. And this is being released, I think, right before the book comes out. So you get chapter 1 as well. So you can start right away. So yeah, Chris will have the link for you, either in an email or link it. And yeah, that's a great way. But it's also on Amazon if you just want to go and directly buy it. It's on all major places, Barnes and Noble. And I'm on Instagram as Jessica Baum, LMHC. If you read the book and and you want to reach out to me, I try really hard to respond to everyone. I want to know, how it's touched you. I encourage that. So reach out to me, stay connected to me. Yeah, and I hope that if you're listening and you take this journey, I really hope that this becomes a companion for you.
That URL, by the way, is Jessica Baum, lmhc.com/interview. I'll include that in the show notes, everyone. And Safe comes out on October 28th, 2025. Jessica, thank you so much again. I'm deeply grateful.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so amazing being interviewed by you, and you really get it. And I'm so grateful for you. And yeah.
Thank you.